Welcome to the first video in my new series, Brief Babbles. These super short videos are aimed at touching on smaller and more creative ideas or vehicles from history, whether they are so obscure that there is not much known about them, or they did not make much of an impact in the grand scheme of things. Every wacky and out there design deserves at least a little bit of recognition. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy, and leave a comment about ideas for future videos. To kick things off, we are looking at the Soviets' answer, keeping armed vehicles on the front lines, even when those lines are completely buried in snow and ice. I would like to introduce to you the light attack sleds known as Aerosans. Aerosans, which is Russian for aero sleigh or propeller-driven sleigh, have been used by the military since at least the 1910s. Aerosans were employed for surveillance, communication, and light transport in the northern regions of World War I. Some of these vehicles had a machine gun ring installation on the roof for the Winter War in 1939 to 1940, and they could tow 4 more men behind them on skis while carrying 4 or 5 men themselves. Because of their inability to climb hills and their restricted maneuverability on twisting forest roads, the Aerosans were initially utilized for transport, liaison, and medical evacuation in deep snow, primarily in open terrain and on frozen lakes and rivers. A claim exists that in 1924 the Soviets obtained plans and specifications for air sleighs from Chester B. Wing, an aviator, automobile dealer, and former mayor of St. Ignace, Michigan. He had built practical aerosleds to aid transportation across the ice between St. Ignace and Mackinac Island, and for use by fishermen. The spring 1943 issue of the magazine, Science and Mechanics, states that, quote, "From his aerosleds, the Russians developed their present battle sled." The claim, though, has to be viewed in a context of a pre-World War I picture of an Igor Sikorsky machine in Kiev. Russia made the most use of these specialized winter combat vehicles. In snowbound remote locations with limited road systems, where tracked and wheeled vehicles were hampered by heavy snowfalls, the vehicles worked very successfully. These Aerosans were divided into combat and transport aerosled battalions. Often employed in cooperation with ski infantry, troops were usually carried or towed by transport Aerosans, while fire support was provided by the heavier machine gun armored models. Aerosans were not used for direct assault because of their vulnerability to explosives such as mortar rounds. One such transport was the RF-8, or Gaz-98. This Aerosan, created by Gorky Narkarech Flota, was deployed by the Soviet Union during World War II. The Gaz-98K was a variation that substituted a 110 horsepower radial aviation engine with a 5-cylinder air-cooled Gaz-Svetsov M11 engine that was more efficient and powerful. The Gorky Automobile Factory produced it under the name Gaz-98 with the design name River Fleet 8. However, it quickly became known as RF-8 Gaz-98. This modest vehicle went into service in January 1942, and it's estimated that 2,000 of them were constructed throughout the war. Like other Aerosans, it was made of aviation plywood and screwed and glued to a wooden frame. The vehicle had a 2.35-meter metal propeller positioned at the back, and was propelled by the same engine as the Gaz MM 4x2 truck. It was supported by 4 wooden skis installed on spring suspension. The metal propeller performed better in wooded places where it was less vulnerable to damage from trees and light undergrowth because the engine was quite low down, giving it a low center of gravity and making it rather stable at speed. The crew compartment was typical of aviation design. A 2-man crew sat in tandem, the driver at the rear and the commander gunner at the front, who was armed with a ring-mounted 7.62mm DT machine gun, allowing 300 degrees of traverse. The RF-8 was fast, low maintenance, and effective. It was perfect for raiding and reconnaissance roles, especially in support of ski troops, often operating behind enemy lines. The RF-8 operated well into the 1950s with the Soviet border guards, and they were pretty well loved among those who used them. Of course, there were other sleds designed by other nations around the same time, and if you care to do a little bit of snooping around, there are numerous images and small posts around the internet about some of the crazier designs, especially from the Germans. Because, of course, the Germans just had to make tanks with skis on them. Not because they worked well, but because they could. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy, think about checking out some of my other content above. or don't if you're lame.